Hi, everybody. Thank you for those joining us. My name is Momo Yamamoto. I am a senior investor research analyst here at Life Science Nation. We are a Boston-based company that helps connect early-stage life science and healthcare startups with investors like our panelists and strategic partners across the globe. We have 5 wonderful panelists here that have expertise in working with these early stage life science and healthcare companies and investing in them, and will be giving us insight on what they're interested in and what their investment process looks like. Everyone here has also attended a Resi conference before, which is our partnering conference, so we would also love to hear your insights on that. I'm also happy to have Jules here, who will be co-moderating this session with me. So Jules, feel free to introduce yourself and we can get this session going.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. As Momo said, my name is Jules Adam, and I'm a reporter with La Biotech, an online media outlet focusing on the biotech industry. We publish daily, we cover news and also in-depth topics. I'm very happy to be here today with a great panel to discuss investment trends and also strategy for companies seeking funding.
I guess, Claire, if you want to kickstart the introductions.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm Claire Smith. I'm a partner at Springtide Ventures. We're an early stage fund focused on companies that elevate health. So we invest in seed and Series A rounds, anything from health tech to deep tech in life sciences and healthcare. And I'm based in Boston, but my team is spread out across the United States.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Yu. I'm a general partner and a managing director in Accelerant Ventures. We're a seed to Series A fund. We invest in health tech, med tech, and tech bio. We're focused on things that are meant to make healthcare more efficient, and we work backwards from there. So we talk about tech bio, for example, for this context, platform companies that are in the process of enabling certain technologies that make things more efficient, cell and gene therapy, et cetera, for example. We write checks from 500,000 to 3 million. We are on our now 12th company that we've invested in, and we're excited to work with this group and talk to you about more of those factors that we're seeing in the market today.
I guess go ahead, Michael.
So Michael Saugaller with the National Institutes of Health. My background is originally medical research at NIH and then spent 20 years on the buy side. Headed 3 small companies, was in venture capital, and also was a lobbyist downtown in DC. Came back about 8 years ago to head our group. So our group is in the Tech Transfer Center. If you're aware of the small business grants that we provide, I'm actually not going to talk about that because that actually has a lot of good awareness. So I'm going to address my comments to the opportunities that companies have out there to partner with the NIH for technology development and commercialization. So what NIH does every year is we put actually more than $1 billion in kind or indirect support through company partnerships. We do a project together, and based on some criteria, we actually offset the cost of helping facilitate and expedite a company's technology development. So if your knowledge about how NIH works with companies begins and ends with SBIRs, then this will be educational for you.
So I'm the founder and CEO of Summer Atlantic Capital. So we are an international asset management that focusing on the investment and international expansion of companies in the life science, healthcare, and technology sectors from the North America region as well as the European region. We are strategic investors in both equity and debt and joint venture operating partners for our portfolio companies in the international markets. So in terms of the investment scope, we focus on life science and technology sector that have great potential to grow in major international markets and are willing and ready to partner with us to grow together. So in terms of the life science sector, we focus specifically like clinical stage biotech assets that address key issues across critical population in major markets across the globe, as well as both clinical and commercialization stage medical device companies. And our typical deal size ranges from $1 million to up to 50 million in terms of equity and $1 million to 50 million in terms of debt. we usually take about 5 to 10 deals in equity per year. And in terms of that, we can take more than 20 deals per year. And I'm based in New York, but currently traveling internationally at this moment. So that's me.
Okay, thank you all about your areas of focus and areas of interest within the industry. So my first question to you all would be, what areas of the life science industry and healthcare industry are you specifically interested in, and why? Are you maybe more focused on a disease area, maybe a specific technology? Could also be a gap in the industry you think should be addressed by a potential future startup. I'll leave it.
Yeah, I guess we could go in the same order. Claire, if you want to start off.
Yeah, so a great way to start here. We're pretty broadly interested in anything that aligns with our mission. So that probably encompasses every disease area and technology type you could think of. I think the things that are out of scope for us tend to be things like single asset pharma companies. We just don't feel that we have the capital base to really support those sort of binary outcomes. But we're very interested in platform technologies. I think, like my co-panelist Chris, very interested in the tech bio sector, the intersection of AI ML with a lot of these problems and the kind of rise in biological data, as enabling some interesting things there, I think is super interesting. We'll also look at life sciences tools. We'll look at devices and diagnostics, but I think in those instances, that's a place where we want to see innovation more on the software side rather than on the hardware side.
Yeah, and similar to Claire, we're very excited about platform companies at the moment. One of our recent investments was in a company called CRISPR-QC. So not investing in a gene editing product per se, but the platform to do things like, how do we make gene editing more efficient? How do we analyze the types of new technologies that we're bringing to be very precise about the medicine that we apply? A lot of how we look at things is we look at the end state and travel backwards. So what is the end goal for a particular technology? Is it to address a very large market, or is it to bring a new type of technology to market that we haven't seen before? We're also pretty excited about things that incorporate kind of I know it's often thought of as more complicated, but we also like the idea of that brass ring of device and delivery at the same time, right? And so we think about things like neuromodulation, and not just from an electrical impedance perspective, but also from a drug delivery perspective. What else can you do as you start to establish more acceptable platforms? So in terms of the question around what else are we seeing that we're excited about, of course, everything to do with big data and AI. Like right now, of course, most of us in the investing world are looking at few deals that are very big, but I liken it to I know this may be a little controversial, but when you go into the supermarket and you see the kind of the ugly vegetable section, that's still just as good, right? So a brown banana is still as good as a ripe yellow banana. Important part is what's inside, right? So we like to think of diamonds in the rough that are out there that we like to identify and then bring forward as investment opportunities. And as a first-time fund, that's part of our strategy, is to make sure that we are ahead of the curve in some of the investments that we make.
So as the world's largest medical research center, it's easier to talk about what we're not interested in, what we are interested in, because we have over 850 active research programs. So really briefly, actually, before I get into what we focus on, what we provide is indirect or in-kind support. So we work with a lot of VCs, portfolio companies, because what we do is we spend money on a company's behalf as part of the collaboration. So we're not directly awarding them money like an SBIR, but we're providing significant resources and capital that offsets the costs of the work. So therefore, that frees up money that the company, for example, has an investment from a VC. So it decreases their burn rate and extends their runway. So one of the easiest ways to say what we don't focus on refers to business model. For better, for worse, we need a technology that is going to address a significant unmet medical need, and therefore needs to go through a regulatory authority, be it EMA or FDA or any of the global regulatory agencies. If your business model is direct to consumer or over the counter, we don't focus on that as much. We're interested in the most common diseases like cancer and diabetes and COVID. We also, though, have a special interest in companies developing treatments that are for rare or neglected or pediatric or orphan indication. And if your company pipeline checks off any of those 4 boxes, you're well aware of how especially challenging it is to get investment interest. But as a public health agency, we're very interested in those as well. We do work about 60% with companies in the therapeutic space, about another 30% in diagnostics and med tech, and then we do work on digital health e-solutions. We don't have a lot of biomedical engineers and coders, so when you get towards med tech and health tech, it's a more common scenario that companies are bringing their technologies to us to co-develop. So you might have an app for diabetes, you've got great coders, what you don't have is a key opinion leader in the diabetes space. So we would try to connect you with a key opinion leader who could then work with your company to move it forward. So our areas are very broad. And again, as long as the business model fits what our focus is on, then we're glad to hear from you.
So for us, I will separate this question into a few different subsectors we're focusing on. So for Summer Atlantic, in terms of clinical stage biotech assets, like what I just mentioned before, we usually focusing on that clinical assets that addresses a key issue across critical population in major markets across the globe. So we focused on most of the indications such as retinal disease, mental health related disease, and neurology, oncology related disease, diabetes, COPD, as well as pain treatment. And we care about the strong competitive advantage to capture the value they're trying to reach. So in terms of health tech and digital health, we look for software-based healthcare product that is already revenue generating, since the nature of health tech and digital health is different from clinical stage biotech assets. And in terms of medical device, we will say we have a broad bandwidth towards medical device, both clinical stage and commercialization stage. Okay for us, but we have to separate into class 1, class 2, or class 3. In terms of class 2 and 3, which is our preferences, we prefer they at least have some clinical data. And also, similar to what Michael just mentioned, we care about if there is something in our team, from our network, our distribution network, that we can bring value to the companies we invested in or partner with in the international markets as well. So that's something we will evaluate based on that as well. It's based on the value we can bring to the growth of the company. So for class 1 device, it's another story. We will require them to receive marketing authorization such as FDA or CE approval already. And the reasons for our focus areas, it's because we wanted to maintain a balanced portfolio for the different time horizons in all the short-term, mid-term, and long-term balanced portfolio, as well as we wanted to capture the potential market size that where the upside is going to bring for us and our investors, as well as we care about, we have a strong ESG focus. We focus about sustainability, even though we don't usually like to use the word ESG to tag us, but we value sustainability and long-term growth. And we wanted to see the companies we partner with is going to show a sustained growth for the long term, not just the short term, as well as not only going to bring financial returns and commercial success, but also social impacts to the society, such as tackling critical health challenges we are facing in different markets.
Thank you. So a very broad range of focus. You mentioned diabetes, medical device, cancer, platform technology, AI. So looking back at 2024, how would you summarize the performance of the life science industry and maybe the specific niche you're most interested in? Did you see any important trends marking this year? It could be investment related or maybe technology related. Claire, you can And
I mean, I think the past everything since 2021 has been a much more challenging fundraising environment. Obviously, that's not news or any big swing that I'm taking by making that statement. But I think at the early stages where I sit at primarily seed, we haven't seen the kind of like dramatic slowdown that I think we saw in the later stages of venture capital, especially when you think about like crossovers and IPOs. I think to me, it seems like the IPO window is becoming a little bit more open. There were some good ones in September. And hopefully that'll start to ease the logjam a little bit, because if we have a company in our portfolio that is looking to raise an A or a B, that's been, I think, a little bit more challenging than some of the stuff in the pre-seed seed stages. So, I mean, great companies are still getting funded, but I think it's a little bit more of a slog. I think investors don't have that sense of FOMO that they did in 2021, where if you didn't rush to get to a term sheet, you were probably going to get beat out. And if you didn't give a high valuation, you were also probably going to get beat out. I think the power dynamic has shifted a little bit more to the investors, but I think I'm expecting to sort of start to see a little bit more of the opening up of the later stage capital markets, which is good news, I think, for all of us on the call, and certainly for all of the companies as well.
Yeah, I would add to Claire's great observations there that the acceleration of the exit side is so important for all of us, that as we see more of the IPOs opening up, we have to see more of the M&A open up as well. And I think one of the things that we should keep an eye on is we'll see a lot of great high profile IPOs this coming year. That's what we're expecting. But we're really hopeful that JP Morgan and other conferences will also see some M&A. I think everyone's taking a little bit longer, and I'm sure everyone on this call who's an entrepreneur has felt that. From the investor perspective, the power dynamic shifting back to the investors, as Claire mentioned, I think it's a natural good pendulum swing, right? We had way too much froth, I think, earlier. Luckily, we weren't writing checks then, but I think a lot of investors are starting to feel that money-making urge again, where valuations have come down to a point where there's more excitement about ensuring that innovation doesn't die on the vine. I think the other interesting part about what we're seeing is, of course, the election is going to impact all of us. I saw there was a question about what happens now. I think one of the things that we're hopeful of is that we can all take a breath and now start to focus back in on making sure innovation does not suffer from kind of an extended period of longer due diligence, few IPOs, and less M&A. We really need to kind of turn that around this year. So I think that trend is something we want to encourage and support and partner with everyone here to make happen.
Any insights, Michael or Seabright?
So we're not your typical investor, but I mean, we don't take equity, and we actually don't do fee for service or contract work. So to work with us, as cliche as it might sound, it's based on the technology. So what we've seen as the year has gone on is we've seen a lot more companies coming to us in the health tech and AI space. And the challenge that we've seen is companies being able to really differentiate themselves from the growing amount of competition in the health tech and the AI space. Now, if a company wants to work with us and we can identify one of our tenured scientists who wants to work with them, then that's really the rate limiting step. But that said, it's becoming more and more of a challenge to determine whether or not there's really something there, because if a company approaches us, we don't enter into months of due diligence before we decide to devote public tax dollars to it. So what I would see as the year went on is the companies that we more and more worked with were those that more successfully presented us with how they were differentiated, and also how what they were proposing has an actionable item attached to their solution, because that's also key with a lot of health tech and AI. The more successful ones were able to more clearly define the problem they were solving and how their technology would be addressing that, rather than just throwing out machine learning or AI or drug discovery and assuming that everybody will just fall in awe.
I'll just summarize the performance of 2024, and for next year, if we look forward towards 2025, that will be a critical transformative year. I mean, by transformative, it could be in a positive way, but could also, if you don't play it well, it could be lead to some like downside risk as well, and could be very challenging. So I would summarize it: driven and filled with uncertainties, changes, but opportunities as well. So if we manage it well and play it wisely, these changes could bring significant advancements to addressing those unmet medical needs and reshaping the delivery of the healthcare industry. So I would say that we did observe some like advancement in potential medical devices, and personally, I have some experience in AI, but from this typical wave of the AI, I don't want to use the word AI to like describe any healthcare or life science companies, because that's not the main goal of the company. Right. So I will say those new technologies, technology advancements that combined together could drive the new software connected with the medical device to become smarter and to drive the upgrades of those devices, and like enhancing the treatments more efficiently. In terms of from the typical investor perspective, I will say that we did see more, there is an uptrend in more strategic M&A opportunities and activities going to bloom in the international markets due to, I would say there is also a reevaluation from the investor perspective of the company's valuation, because we did see some like before the COVID and during the COVID, we see the market volatilities, and some companies were going back to their like original valuation, things like that, which is unfavorable to the companies, but somehow could be favorable to the investors. But I would say just the driving back to its real value, right? So at the end of the day, we did see some looking forwards and onward. There are some like reevaluation the companies have to be prepared due to the market challenges and cautions rising up in the early stage investments from the investment community due to the macroeconomic pressures, regional wars and regional recession, things like that. So companies should be prepared for a potential reevaluation from investors, but can also be more flexible to partnership structures with the potential international markets partners, since companies in the international markets are more active looking for different partners globally.
Thanks. I think we've touched the topic of the future perspective with the last question, but maybe very briefly looking towards 2025, what would be your predictions for the industry? Do you see a financial trend marking 2025, maybe a technology being the center of attention next year?
I mean, I think in general, I hope that we continue to see the financing environment soften up, get a little bit easier for companies, but I'm not a macro prognosticator. I think anyone who invests in early stages, who takes big swings on the macro side, is either in the wrong job or kind of pontificating about something they don't spend a ton of time like really solidly dedicated to. So I'm going to decline to get into specifics there.
I love that. That was super diplomatic. Thanks, Claire. I would agree. I think it's hard to really see what next year is going to be about. But the Wall Street just had an article today about how we've taken in a lot of money as far as the VC side, but we haven't really seen a lot of output to return back to our LPs, right? And so just as much as all the entrepreneurs here on our Zoom are wondering, gee, how do I bridge to that next fundraising event where the markets have come back and really support risk again? We in the VC community are also sitting on piles of cash, and our LPs are starting to get impatient. Things look a little long in the tooth. So redemptions where there's a focus on making sure our LPs are happy is important. I think this year and next year is gonna see a lot more of that. And I do again hope that we see more of the M&A activity, I think driven more again and focused on platform companies. Simply from a selfish perspective, we think that that's where the markets really are going to grow, especially in cell and gene therapy. But it would be hard to really say 2025 is going to be this or that without seeing more output in IPOs and M&As.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of next year, yeah, Christy mentioned JP Morgan Healthcare Week. That's definitely going to be a big one for, I'm sure, a lot of the attendees as well. But during that week, we will also have our Resi conference, which I mentioned is a early stage life science and healthcare focused partnering conference. But all of you have attended Resi in the past. So, and some of you will be joining us for Resi JP. Maybe some of us will be joining us for Resi London, which is taking place early December. but how has Resi been helpful or beneficial for you in terms of meeting different startups and whatnot?
So I'll start. So it's been very good for us because we need deal flow. The situation is that the Small Business Investigational Research Program, or SBIRs, is a truly great program providing essential seed capital to early stage innovation. It's only part of the story, though. And so the awareness about SBIR is terrific. The awareness of how else the NIH could work with you to leverage whatever investment capital you've been able to raise, be it preclinical or through early clinical trial, is usually met with a blank expression. So although we work with companies all the way from startups to probably all the top 50 pharmas globally, the awareness of what NIH could bring to the table gets less as this company gets smaller. So what we find at Resi, why it's been good for us, is we find companies that have been de-risked. They've at least, most of them have gotten some seed capital or some early validation, even if it's through, say, SBIR grants, and that de-risks it for us. So although we are solely focused on is the technology of interest to NIH, I certainly would prefer, if I'm knocking on the door, so to speak, of a National Academy of Science member for a certain disease, if I'm going to ask them to take some time out to take a look at a company, if it's been de-risked because it's gotten some early stage validation through a Resi event, that certainly makes me more comfortable to ask them to take some of their time. So it's been great for us to create awareness about how we can work with VC and other seed capital to leverage those dollars to extend your burn rate. And it's also let companies know about some of the advantages that we have that can help them. I'll just mention one very briefly because I know we're limited in time. Through your tax dollars, you've paid for literally hundreds and hundreds of research tools that we've developed, animal models of diseases and things like that, that you can get from us, antibodies, reagents, cell lines, that you can get from us at our cost. We don't make money off of it. We're just covering our transportation expenses. And you can use those tools instead of spending, say, VC dollars to internally develop. You can just not exclusively license it from us, and it can expedite your preclinical proof of concept work. And then the other thing, which is terrific, is that if you happen to discover any new intellectual property using a tool that you got from us, your company actually exclusively owns it. It's not jointly owned with us. You don't have to negotiate for equity. Your company owns it. So anyway, Resi's been really great for us to create awareness about how we can assist your attendees.
And I would just jump a couple of sentences very fast. I mean, we appreciate Resi a lot because we always look for, there are many conferences all over the places, but we value our time as an investor. So we have different deal flows, and there are sometimes one of the pain is too many emails coming in every day, and I believe all of people are facing that, right? So Resi indeed is bringing high quality deals, as well as it's a very highly organized system. We like the system a lot, right? So we can do our research and filters ourselves by our elements, the wizard system, as well as a strategic investor, we always look to build with our portfolio companies to grow with them as their operating partners. So we always look for like-minded investors like ourselves to co-build with as well with the different distribution channels and the resources we can bring to facilitate the growth of our portfolio companies. So that's something Resi was bringing to us as well. And what we are doing right now is something similar. So it's very well organized with high quality, like-minded people who would like to bring the value to foster the ecosystem to grow together. So that's a thing we value a lot.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so fantastic about going to Resi is that it's focused on connecting startups to investors. Like, I think oftentimes there's these really giant conferences, which are fantastic in their own way, but as an investor, you're kind of pulled in a billion different directions, like interacting with corporates and interacting with your investors and interacting with other VCs. And then like the startups just become like a piece of what you're doing. I think going to Resi is fantastic because it allows you to be laser focused on connecting with innovators, connecting with founders. And I assume that the founders feel the same way, where everybody is there to investors and founders to meet each other. And there's kind of not the distraction of having like 80 different stakeholder groups that are pulling you in a million different directions. And of course, really high quality companies. Really enjoyed Resi Boston this year.
Yeah, and I'd just add that the kind of vetting, the due diligence is easier once we know that the companies have gone through Resi's kind of selection process, if you will. And the conferences I've found to be really great ways to make sure we have headlights on what's coming. There are definitely every time we've gone to Resi is new companies that we had no idea existed, right? And so that is an important part of our job, is to make sure as we build deal flow that we're not just being passive about people coming to us, but we are going out to meet people and always in search of that next big thing that could be the right fit for our portfolio.
Thank you, everyone, for all the kind words about our Resi conference. So we do know that the conferences can get very busy. We understand investors get a lot of messages, but how selective are you when it comes to booking meetings with these companies? Is there anything that companies can do to stand out when they reach out to you? I guess, Michael, if you want to start us off in that order.
So because we have, let's just say, a broad portfolio, I think and limited time, I think the companies can stand out that for us have an idea of how their medical solution is going to impact public health. Now, they also, by the way, have to have their commercialization plan in place, because NIH's mission is not just to improve global health, which is what most people know. Our goals also include facilitating economic development. So we're supposed to take the 45 billion that we get from you, the taxpayer, and actually give you a return on investment, help more products get sold, bring more products to market so you can hire more people and lease more space and pay more taxes. So the companies coming to us, I would say that since, unlike my colleagues on the panel, we're not as focused on the IRR, but we're focused on the global health benefit, which is directly tied to an IRR. So for us, it would be what is your medical solution? And again, how is it distinct from other players out there?
I guess I'm the next. So for us, the first thing first, that we care about the market feasibility, competitive advantage of the underlying assets, the product the company is trying to build. And then in terms of the market feasibility, we mean in the markets you're trying to target. For the US market, of course, it's going to be your first target markets. What else? And why you decided? So the strategic fit, how you go to that direction and how you decide, how you make that decision. The logic behind that is something we evaluate as well. And also, of course, potential for significant social impacts as well. So besides the strategic fit, we care about the aligned focus with what we are doing, such as the sector focus, of course, and the goals of the company that align with our interests as well, and where we can see ourselves bring value to the growth of these companies in markets they are trying to enter as well. And besides that, we care about, I would say, the transparency in communications when a company is trying to reach to us, because it's kind of like as an investor, you always try to do well on your due diligence, right? So transparency, especially in the communication from our previous experience, indeed brings lots of signals if it's going to be a red flag or not. So that's going to be something crucial for us as well.
Claire and Chris?
I think there are two things that can help you stand out. The first is just doing like a little bit of homework on the VC community or on the VCs that you're thinking about. So just making sure like there's nothing competitive in their portfolio. Like we have a cardiac monitor, and I can't tell you like the number of times that like I'll get outreach from companies where I'm like, this is directly competitive with my portfolio. Like I'll take a meeting, but like there's no way I can invest in this. Just kind of doing that work and just getting a sense for like, is this the right type of group for my company? Do they have, like, if you're a diagnostic company, do they have other diagnostics that they've invested in? Do they only tend to do things that are like single asset versus platforms? Like just doing a little bit of pre-work there, I think can probably give you a little bit of a higher success rate in terms of outreach. And the other thing that tends to happen at these conferences is there'll often be like several companies in the same space. So I'm just going to pick on one that I've kind of noticed, like diagnostics for better sepsis detection. in the digital health side of things. Like we've seen a ton of companies in that space. And I think being able to articulate like why you are different than those other companies can kind of help you stand out. When I'm sitting there looking at my inbox going like, it looks like 3 people doing the exact same thing just reached out to me. Like, do I want to take any of these meetings? Like if someone can articulate like how they're going to win in that space, I think that really makes you stand out.
Yeah, and I think the importance of a warm introduction is always very helpful for the process. So if Claire or Seabright or Michael said, "Hey, I saw this interesting company that may fit your investment thesis," that automatically puts a company on a higher level of interest for us. But I would say that to Claire's point, you got to do your homework on us, right? I mean, there's so much information about us on the web. And if there isn't, then you're going to have to go to get your PitchBook subscription or Crunchbase or whatever it is, and go through it like an archaeologist, really study the VCs to say, okay, culturally, I think I'm going to fit well with that group because they've invested in these companies. They're not competitive, but complementary. Also understand the process that we go through, not just due diligence, but portfolio construction, right? Where are we in our investments? Have we done 10 investments in the space and we're really not going to do another one? Or are we towards the end of our cycle investment and therefore maybe that VC is looking for that unicorn? And so I'm going to say I fit that or I don't, right? It's completely okay to not be the unicorn, right? There are plenty of VCs out there, including us, who are looking for investments that have a quicker ROI because we're a first time fund. Therefore, our ROI horizon is much more contracted than a normal VC with fund 6, 7, 8, right? So those are things that you got to do as homework and kind of just spray and pray. Really, I would say in my experience, I was an operator for many years. It's like that doesn't, I mean, yeah, luck may be a part of it, but I'm not sure that that's the best use of your time. And on the VC side, I'm not sure that they feel very much like you've done the work to make that meeting that you're going to have worth it. So those are some suggestions.
Okay, maybe one last question from me before we switch to Q&A. You said that it was important for startups to do their research on the funds, but on your side, when it comes to making the decision of investing or not, what's other factors beyond the science and the technology that weigh in the decision of investing? Is it a team? Is it leadership, strategy? And on the contrary, are there maybe some red flags coming from a company looking to fundraise?
Anyone can jump in here.
I mean, I'm happy to kick things off. The most important thing for any investment for us, and I think probably every early stage investor, is the team. Early stage companies, like something's going to go wrong. Like it's not going to go according. I don't know if there's any investment that ever has been like this linear trajectory going according to plan, perfect hockey stick growth, whatever you want to think about it. Like, and finding operators who are, we talk about the cheetah CEO is the phenotype that we're looking for. Finding people who are going to be able to surmount those challenges, whether that involves pivoting strategy, adjusting, like building the right team of absolute A players around them. That's the most important thing. So yeah, I want to see a great technology that I think will be disruptive rather than incremental. Like I want to see a market that maybe it's a great wedge where you have a really compelling rationale, or maybe it's just like an absolute tremendous market or something that's being created. Like, yeah, there's work that we want to do there to feel good about it and to feel like we can support the investment return that we're expecting. But it's team.
And I'll pile onto that to say the reflection of how the team operates is also very important. And we've pretty much could point to 90% of the red flags of reasons why we did invest in the way that the team interacts. Each of the team is reflected. Sorry, say again, Momo.
I think you might have frozen for a sec, but you're good.
Okay. Can you still hear me? Sorry, I'm not sure where I cut out, but it's the how the team operates, right? And watching them operate. One quick example would be something as simple as organization, right? So how people are fit within an organizational structure, and do you have the right people on the bus? Those are really like very important things that we do pay attention to. We may not say so, but we look at that carefully because we think about the arc of the startup's journey and who's where and how do those seats change over time? And I think that reflects back to the statement that Claire made, that team is really the number one factor as well for us.
Great. So, oh yeah, Seabright, go ahead if you have any.
Oh yeah, I'm just going to Like repeat one more time about Claire, Chris just mentioned, it's above all is a people. So people, when you ask this question, people is of course the first thing come to my mind, balanced leadership and management team. Regardless if it's saying like early stage or mid stage or even late stage, that's above all, that's something we care the most. And we also care about, I will say like if we rank this as a top priority in terms of the product, we will say we can give it, if it's 60% finished, it's okay as long as it's in the right direction. We can help the founders and the management team to refine and rebuild with our resources. That's where we can bring value and what all the investors here can bring value as well. And then we care about operational excellence as well as the governance, as well as the ethical issues going on. That's some parts of our due diligence verticals as well, which is a little bit unique from our perspective. So I would say that a transparency culture is something we care about again as well. And in terms of the red flags to avoid, I would say like as a to a well-balanced team, we would say weaken dysfunctioning leadership. And also the team never worked together and this is their first time to work together. That's something I'm not going to say it's a red flag, but something we have to pay some attention to and spend more time working with before we decide to invest or not. And also, I will say that like if there are any regulatory or ethical risk happened in the past, those founders, so management team, there could be potential red flags for us as well. We have to investigate significantly on that, as well as if for early stage biotech startups, they have many different assets in their pipeline. It's something raise our attention as well.
Great, thank you. So we're going to jump into Q&A. Investors, feel free to, anyone can just jump in. Not everyone has to answer the question. Also, going back to Chris, what you said, quickly like to note to the attendees, like if you are attending the Resi conference on the partnering platform, please make sure to read the investors' profiles. We do make sure to include as much information there as possible. So make sure you are reaching out to an investor who actually is a fit. Okay, so I won't be able to answer or ask all the questions, but I guess very quickly, Michael, we do have some questions for you about the NIH. So if you can just input in the chat, maybe a website that you can lead some of these people to so they can learn more about the NIH programs, that would be great. But I guess one question here is, how important are face-to-face meetings to you? I guess we would like to note that our Resi conference, we do have virtual attendees. So yeah, does it really matter for you guys? Do you prefer face-to-face meetings over doing it virtually? Anyone with any strong particular opinion?
I mean, I personally love to meet people face to face because I think it gives you a better sense. Like it's a two-way street. Like we're diligencing the companies, but the company should also be diligencing us in terms of like, is this person going to be a good board member to work with? Like, do I want to really commit to like this kind of difficult to get out of relationship when you take money from someone? So I think it's really important for that and to kind of get the sense for each other. I think to have like a really technical in-depth pitch in like a 20-minute partnering session is a misuse of the time. So I would kind of get your elevator pitch, your kind of 5-minute intro of why you should want to take a second meeting with the company and kind of approach it from that perspective. That first it's to kind of like meet them personally and then get that second meeting.
Great. I guess bouncing off of that, like you guys probably have mentioned this already a little bit, but what are some common mistakes made when people are doing pitches to VCs?
Oh, darn. I just unmuted as I was going to talk about the importance of in-person.
Oh, go
Handle
ahead.
that one. I can try. That would take quite another couple of hours. I'm sure Michael, Seabright, and Claire would agree. There's so many things to point to, and there's some really good programs. I'm assuming Resi has them as well to help you go through what typically are the common mistakes that people make. Everything from a pro forma that is just simply unrealistic and everybody sees it as so, to not being quote unquote coachable and answering questions in a way that makes it clear you're not coachable. Those are all basic things. But what I've seen more and more nowadays is, while it's so important to make that initial connection with your potential investor, I don't see that there's enough time spent on making sure that every future question is answered. In other words, the more that you can see where the discussion is going and be able to plan ahead, everything from a very robust data room with all of the science packaged together to I'm already thinking about who my exit opportunities are. If you can understand that journey and then have thought and show that you've thought about it, I think that's to me one of the important things that is often overlooked is to think the long term, because that is really how we have to think for our LPs. Is it's a 10-year horizon for any particular VC fund, and maybe even longer nowadays. We have to think that way, so we want you to as well.
Great. We have another question here. Because we are holding a Resi in London, we probably do have some international attendees joining us. So I guess I guess we can mix these two different questions, but how does the current US market landscape trend affect investing in portfolio companies overseas, or vice versa? Like, how do you have any tips, or how should a foreign company navigate entering the US market, if you have any insight on that?
Well, I would just be the first one to take this question since our strategy is really focusing on the international market. So I would say it really depends on where you are focusing on, again, due to the current market uncertainties. Because due to the market volatility, it brings new strategies. So if like international market companies trying to enter the US, I would say that it's indeed, especially with the new Trump administration, could bring new policies that could be beneficial to foreign enterprise to enter the US market, because the Trump administration, oh well, it's still in the transition period, I would say. So in the transition period, but it's going to focusing significantly on the boosting the US economy, which will be, if you are trying to enter the US market as a foreign enterprise, it's going to be extremely critical for you to be localized US company to do well to benefit from the different policies that might be potentially here. And then in terms of the US companies going another way around, going overseas. So in terms of depends on where you are trying to go, of course. So we have experience dealing with the Chinese market, for example, and the European market as well. So in terms of the Chinese market, the Chinese FDA, they recently changed their name to NMPA. But anyways, the Chinese FDA really refers to whatever going on with the US FDA as the main reference. So if you have clinical data from the US FDA, of course, that's going to be very beneficial for you to deal with the Chinese FDA as compared to the European CE. So the EMA. So I will say that in terms of that, we see the international opportunities, you need to rebalance your valuations and the structure you are thinking, not just thinking about getting a very high upfront payment in terms of doing licensing or co-development with the international partners. You have to explore and accept relatively lower upfront payments, but focusing more on the mid to long term due to the current economic recession, things like that.
Right. Understanding the interest between platform versus single assets. Someone asks, what about assets that have potential for, what about, I guess, single asset is what they mean, that have potential for multiple indications?
I'll answer this super quickly on behalf of the Springtide perspective. I think that's still an instance where you have a binary risk profile. It's still a single product. So for us, that's challenging to underwrite. But there are plenty of investors who are very interested in those spaces, and there's some great returns and some great success stories in that space.
Great. Thank you. So thank you, investors. Thank you, our panelists, for joining us today. Thank you for everyone who attended our session. This will be recorded and it will be sent out. Maybe you will have the chance to meet some of our panelists in a future Resi. And just for quick Resi conference dates, we will have our Resi London in person on December 4th at 11 Cavendish Square. And then that will be followed by Resi JPM, which will be our biggest conference of 2025 at the San Francisco Marriott Marquis on January 14th in person. Both will be followed by virtual partnering as well. So we hope to see you all there. Thank you everybody so much. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your day.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate the
Thank you.